I'm sorry this took me so long. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and this is the Fiio FT1, which is a closed-back dynamic driver headphone that came out about a year ago, and it got a lot of hype, and a lot of people were asking me to review it, and I'm just now getting around to it, but it's actually not so bad because we've also got Fio's new FT13, which is not exactly a sequel, it's kind of like a step up from the FT1, and we're gonna do kind of a little combo review of these two headphones together. To kind of set the stage, both of them are dynamic driver headphones, both of them are closed backs, both of them have wood cups on the outside. I believe over here we've got a walnut, and then on this new FT13, we've got a purple heartwood, which is kind of pretty, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. Apart from that, there is also going to be a price difference between them. The FT1, this is still available at around $165 US right now. And the FT13, well, this one's going to be, again, kind of a step up, and it's priced appropriately at $330 US. So for the past, actually, I don't know, a month or so that I've had these things on hand, I've been coming to grips with a couple of questions. One, does this live up to the hype? And two, does the FT13, the new one, well, does it live up to the reputation set before it? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this review. Before we do that, though, a quick shout out to Fiio for sending these headphones in for review. If you want to check out either of these headphones, of course, I'll have them linked in the description down below. But with that said, let's go to the table. We'll talk about the build quality, fit and comfort, physical form factor, accessories, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the sound and how these headphones compare with a couple of other closed back headphones. So mostly I'm going to be talking about this from the perspective of the FT13 because this is the new headphone and it is the headphone which is the parent of all the accessories that are set out here. So here's the box. It is large. I'm not going to put it on camera, but what you get inside the box is frankly kind of nice. Apart from the headphone itself, which we'll talk about in a little bit, did want to highlight it comes with a really, really nice carry case. Fio's been including these with their other headphones, and it is very nice to see. It's not just like nicely made. It even has like little compartments and stuff to store the accessories, a little spare cable terminations and accessories and stuff like that, which is really nice. The FT1 also comes with a case. It's a little bit smaller, not quite as nice as this one, but frankly, I don't know, it's pretty much just as nice. It's a really nice case as well. Apart from that, let me put this to the side real quick. You do get a baggie to hold your headphone in. If this case, I guess, is a little bit too unwieldy, you can just store it in a baggie, or you can double up and just be really, really careful. You do also get a really nice microfiber towel, which I don't usually see these with headphones. And this is actually, unironically, a very nice microfiber towel. It's really thick and quite large, so I like to see that, I suppose. There are also two different sets of ear pads, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about the sound, because it is notable these pads are different. So the pads that you can see I have on here now are more of like a suede or maybe almost more of a velour, whereas these pads are a lambskin leather. So very different textures, which is going to play a part in terms of fit and comfort, but it's also going to play a part in terms of sound. But then I guess that'll lead us into talking about the build quality on the headphone and the cable itself. We'll start with the cable, and just to highlight briefly, it does have swappable terminations, which I really like to see. This is actually, frankly, this is just a fantastic headphone cable. One of the best headphone cables I've ever seen. It's thick and beefy, you know, it's braided kind of like an IEM cable, but it's still really well behaved. In fact, I think this is better behaved than a lot of Fio's other cables, and they usually do pretty good cables. This is just, frankly, a really nice cable. As you can see, it terminates into dual 3.5 millimeter at the headphone end. So this will be compatible with a lot of headphones, not just the FT13 that we've got here. And then down here, as I was trying to get to, it does terminate into a swappable termination. So I've got it set up in 3.5 mil config because that's my preferred termination. But if you want, you can unscrew this, you can pop that off, and you can convert it into a 4.4 mil balance cable. Hold on, I'm looking for the alignment guides because I don't want to do this wrong. You guys are watching me. There we go, right? You push that on and I'm doing it wrong. But anyway, you know how this stuff works. It does also come with, and that you might have seen it when I was opening up the case, it does come with a 3.5 millimeter to 6.35 millimeter adapter as well. So if you need to connect it to a larger desktop amplifier, you can, but it's not going to be like a nice screw-on swappable termination like we got here. Now, that said, what else can I say about this cable? Probably not too much. Just to say again, this is one of the best headphone cables I've frankly ever seen. Now, the headphone itself, let me move this into view. Maybe actually just briefly, I will also highlight the cable that comes with the FT1, which is not quite as nice as the FT13 cable. Maybe you would expect that. The price is $165, basically half the price. That said, it's still a pretty nice cable. Still terminates in dual 3.5 mil, still has, you know, single in 3.5 mil. I believe this one came with some more termination things that you can connect to the end of it, maybe a 6.35 mil. But let's talk about the headphone itself. And I've kind of already highlighted the fact that it is using actually a purple heart wood on the outer ear cup. Here in this case, it is quite glossy, you can see, whereas on the FT1, it was maybe more of a satin finish. So I guess there's a distinct difference there, but it's not going to be as big a difference as the fact that just the wood color is quite a bit different. Apart from that, there's still also some other differences in terms of the build quality. Maybe I will start by highlighting the things that are pretty much the same, like the headband design. Pretty much exactly the same sort of headband design, which is to say, you know, I actually think this is not a bad headband design. It doesn't feel necessarily super premium. I think the cheapest feeling part about it is just these metal bands right here around the outside are a little bit on the rough side, and because they rub right up against this faux leather headband, I do worry about the longevity of it. I had the same issue with the FT1 Pro, but I don't know, in terms of like functionality and stuff, I actually kind of like it. It's just simple, bare bones, and comfortable enough for me. Neither of these headphones are particularly heavy, so you don't have to worry too much about weight distribution, but yeah, I don't know, generally pretty decent little headband. The build quality on the headphone itself, though, I will say, doesn't really feel any more premium on this headphone than it does on the FT1. If anything, you know, this feels maybe a little bit on the plasticky, kind of clacky side, but again, it's 165 bucks. You can kind of excuse it. Whereas here on the FT13, well, it doesn't feel too much different. It doesn't really feel much more premium, but the price is quite a bit higher, apart from, of course, again, the purple heart wood. Now, I'm saying the things that are similar. Now let's talk about the things that are different. And you might have noticed that the ear cup shape is actually quite a bit different. So it's a lot larger and more round here on the FT13, which is going to play a part in terms of the ear pad shape, but it also plays a part in terms of something I think that is actually a little bit of a downgrade, okay? And maybe I'll talk about this more when I talk about the fit and comfort, but we're kind of getting to that point anyway. And it's basically just the issue that these cups don't rotate backward enough. So when I have this on the side of my head, I'm basically getting a lot more pressure at the top and less pressure at the bottom, so I have kind of an uneven seal because this is basically just bottoming out in terms of its range, whereas on the FT1, this headphone, I don't have that issue. Yes, it will still bottom out if I'm putting it in front of you here on camera, but on my head, I don't have this issue. So a little bit of a downgrade on that side. Now, I guess I will also briefly highlight that you can see the driver inside of there, which is kind of cool to see. It's a little bit on the fancy side, and I do believe this is an angled driver. So just a note on that, when you have a headphone with an angled driver, a lot of the times, the sound signature is going to be sensitive, or it's going to be more sensitive than usual to placement on your head. And I did find that to be somewhat the case here with the FT13. I don't know that I think this is necessarily a good idea, but you know, the benefits would be that you do have a lot more room here in the back of the ear cup. You can see that there's a lot of room for your ear, which is where it's largest, whereas in the front of the ear cup, there's less room, but there's also less ear there. So that's not so much a bad thing. I guess the last thing I will show you before I throw this thing on my head is that the terminations on this thing are angled a little bit forward, which just means that they keep the cords away from your shoulders when you're wearing them, which is pretty convenient. So that's it. I'm gonna throw this thing on my head, and ooh, this is the first time I've talked to myself while wearing these things. So they are a closed back headphone. They will occlude your hearing. They will isolate you somewhat. In fact, enough that I'm gonna go ahead and unblock this ear so I sound a little bit better to myself. But here you go. This is what this headphone looks like on the head of a human. And yeah, generally I would say that it is a pretty roomy ear cup. Again, I was mentioning that placement on your ear is going to affect the sound, and just to kind of give you an idea of how much range of movement, like this is my ear toward the front of the ear cup, this is my ear toward the back of it. Probably I would wear it a little bit more toward the center, just in terms of comfort, like, or where it kind of lands naturally on my head. But like I was mentioning, you might have noticed that like there's no additional range on this yoke adjustment here. It is basically, as I mentioned, completely bottomed out, which means that there's more pressure up here at the top, less pressure down here at the bottom. And so the seal is just not super consistent. And that is It's kind of a bummer. With the original FT1, again, I didn't have that issue. I was just checking to see if I'm wearing it backward, and I still might be because I didn't look that closely. But yeah, this thing, look, I still have a little bit of additional outward range, which means that it's applying pressure more evenly, and well, it just feels more secure in my head. This one just never really quite gets there. So that's a little bit of a bummer. All right, let me check my notes, see if there's anything else I want to talk about in terms of build quality. I don't think so. Accessories, no, we talked about that. Actually, one thing briefly I did want to mention also, another thing that I think is kind of a, I guess a bit of a downgrade here on the FT13. I like the ear pad mounting mechanism that we have on the FT1. It's just like this pretty traditional skirt that kind of, you know, folds inside of a small gap. And why I like this is that it makes it really easy to find replacement ear pads out there. There's a ton of manufacturers out there that are making headphones with this mounting mechanism for years. So you can find, you might have a bunch of headphones that already have it, and it can be fun to roll pads and switch different pads to see different sound signatures and stuff that you can get. But with the FT13, they've moved to a more clip-mounted system, which is really easy to use. In fact, it's probably a lot easier to use for most people who are just getting into pad swapping. This might be maybe the more user-friendly result, but it does mean that it's only going to be compatible with other Fiio pads. I can confirm it's compatible with pads from the Fiio FT7, which is another headphone they had that came out earlier this year. Although I will say I have also graphed it with those pads, and I don't recommend those pads. I would stick with these two pads, which I think will lead us into talking about the sound signature on these headphones. And yeah, let's see. How do I want to do this? We can start by talking about the sound here on the FT1, which again had quite a bit of hype last year. A lot of people were asking me to review it, and I did hear it briefly at a Can Jam about a year ago, but I didn't really get to spend that much time with it. So I did get to spend some more time with it, and let's take a look at squiggling. Let's take a look at the squigs. Let me pull that up real quick. But boom, here you go. Here is the frequency response of the Fiio FT1, the original, the cheaper one. And as you can see, kind of up against target, like this is a pretty reasonably well-tuned headphone with, yes, quite a bit of bass, and maybe you could argue a little bit on the uneven treble performance. I find the treble to be mostly okay. It does get a little touch clary in certain spots, but I don't find the treble to be too much of a big issue. More the issue for me is the bass performance. It's just not especially tight bass performance. And the whole sound signature of this headphone is what I would call just kind of like a mild V-shaped sound signature that is, to my ear, decent sounding. And that might not sound like the description that you're expecting from a headphone that got quite a bit of hype last year. And I think part of it is just that people have pretty low expectations when it comes to closed back headphones, especially closed back headphones under $200. I mean, what are the great closed back headphones out there? There's not really a whole lot out there. So amongst those, well, yeah, this pretty decent tuning is actually kind of stands out as it's pretty decent tuning. This is a very listenable headphone. It's a little bit soft in the bass. Treble can be a little bit on the splashy side sometimes. But mostly this is pretty decent sounding. Now with the FT13, the purple, more expensive Purple Heart one, you can see that it's actually kind of in line. It's not too far different. In fact, if anything, we've got a little bit less bass here, and maybe you could say a little bit more treble in certain spots. And maybe quite a bit more treble, like in this particular spot. That said, I don't know that this graph tells the full story because this stock sound here, this is with the lambskin pads, by the way. I mentioned that there's two different pads, two different sounds. The lambskin ones, which are the ones I don't have on the headphone right now, is what we're looking at. And I don't have these on the headphone right now because what this doesn't necessarily tell you is it is just way, way too bright, way too bright. It is like kind of unlistenably bright. The FT13, again, that is the Purple Heart headphone here, with the stock lambskin pads. Now, if you switch to the suede pads, they call them suede, it feels like more of a velour. What you might have noticed is there was quite a bit more bass added here. In fact, let me show them both to you at the same time so you can kind of do this before and after comparison. Let me change the color on it so it's a little bit clearer to see what's going on. So yeah, the lambskin pads have quite a bit less bass, but still like a boosted bass. Up top, not too much changes, but this additional bass that you get on the suede pads, it really does help to counterbalance some of that excessive treble that you have up top. and it makes the FT13 a much more balanced listen. It's still very much a V-shaped sound signature, even more V-shaped than the FT1. In fact, I would say that this is just a really contrasty sound versus the FT1 with, frankly, probably too much bass, but I think a lot of people will like it. And I know people will like it because I've got another headphone that we'll talk more about in comparisons here, which is the Meze 99 Classics, also way too much bass. But this is exactly the headphone I was thinking of when I made this measurement of the FT13 and saw how much excessive bass there is there. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a very bassy V-shaped sound signature. If you're looking for something with like a really balanced mid-range focus, that is not what the FT13 is. The FT1 also really isn't that, but it's much more of a mid-range focus sound, right? If you're looking for more, just a more balanced sound overall, the FT1 will be that. Whereas again, the FT13 over here is just a much more V-shaped, contrasty sound. Now, in terms of more of, I guess, my subjective listening impressions, not that any of that isn't subjective. In terms of, I guess, you know, what we would call technical performance, separation between sounds, imaging quality, sound stage, the FT1 is squarely where I would say it's fine. It's fine. It's not particularly standout, but again, in the closed back arena, nothing really is. So I would say that the image separation is fine. It's better than some headphones, again, as we'll talk about as I bring in some comparisons in a bit, but it's also not that standout. Now, I will say, to the FT13's credit, it is a lot more incisive of a sound signature. The separation between instruments is a lot stronger on this. Imaging is stronger, which just means it sounds more like kind of like a 3D field from the music, right? Of course, it varies by music, but you get what I'm saying. And you could even say that this thing has bigger soundstage than the FT1, but it comes at the cost of just being kind of uncomfortable to hear. I will say with the suede pads, it's better. But I still think even with the suede pads, I would rather listen to the slightly duller sounding FT1. It's a more balanced sound, because even with the suede pads, giving you that additional bass boost, which kind of counterbalances the treble, it still ends up being a little bit on the splashy side for my taste. Now, okay, checking my notes to see if there's anything else I want to talk about. I don't think so. So I did mention, I do want to bring in a couple of other headphones for comparison. And to do this, look, man, headphones are big. We got to make room. We got to make room. And I'm probably going to do a bad job of this. But of course, we've got the 99 Classics, which we talked about just a bit ago. We've also got another closed back headphone, kind of a similar price point. Also got kind of a bit of hype a number of years ago, but this is the AKG K371. And then, yeah, for S's and G's, we'll throw in the Sony XM6, which is just not a fair comparison for a lot of reasons. It's a noise canceling Bluetooth headphone, very, very different, but it's known for not sounding very good, although I did get it to sound pretty decent with EQ. And so, hold on, I got to play music too. I didn't mean to do that. Thanks, touch controls. I need to turn this thing off. Hold on. There we go. We figured it out. But yeah, I thought this would be kind of an interesting benchmark against these other closed back headphones. So, all right, I'm going to go through them. So the FT1, which is this headphone over here, I noted down that it's not bad, but kind of also not great. I think the treble is a little bit on the glary side, but not quite to the point that it sounds uncomfortable. I think the bass is a little bit also on the soft side. It doesn't have especially strong impact or anything like that. But the imaging, I would say, is passable on the FT1. The FT13 is very contrasty, as we just got done talking about. It does have tighter, more impactful bass than the FT1, but the treble is just kind of obnoxious. Even when you tame it down with the additional bass of these suede pads, I find it to be pretty irritating to listen to. It kind of has like a dry character to it. And well, it does have decent imaging, so I'll give it that. I would say the imaging is a step above what we have here on the FT1. Now, the K371, the AKG that we've got here, I would say that this sounds kind of like a warmer, softer version of the FT1. Also still pretty bassy, but it's really just kind of dark in the treble. And so it gives it this overall warm, soft, kind of dull sound, really two-dimensional. We talked about the imaging on this being okay. I would say the imaging on the AKG is subpar. It is not okay. Yeah, and for that reason, I just never really gotten much enjoyment from this headphone, even though I've owned it since it came out a few years ago. Finally, well, I guess not quite finally, but we'll move on to the 99 Classics over here by Meze. And I will also confess My 99 Classics are modified. I mentioned, having access to swappable ear pads. This is using that swappable ear pad mechanism. So I have opted to swap on Brainwave's micro suede pads, which I kind of love on this headphone. It does sound better than it does out of the box. So some of these things I'm about to say about the sound are not true of this headphone when you buy it out of the box. But as it is, it's pretty contrasty. It's pretty fun. It's got just giga bass, but it's also it's tighter, it's punchier, it's more impactful than the bass that we get over here on the FT13. I mentioned that this is kind of, the squig reminded me of the squig of this, and it very much plays a part. Like, they have a similar level of V to the sound signature, similar level of bass emphasis, but you just get a lot more of the texturing and the feel of the bass out of the 99 Classics. And I also find that the treble is okay. It's not the best treble, but it's more balanced to me. I never really find it to be uncomfortable the way that the FT13 does. And so that kind of like dry, gritty character that we get on the FT13, I never really get with the 99 Classics. In terms of like imaging performance, I would actually say it's pretty comparable to what we get on the FT13, which is to say, yeah, it's not fantastic by like open back headphone standards, but it's actually not bad. And then finally, the headphone that nobody asked me to compare to these headphones, the Sony XM6. And again, I'll caveat this. This is with my EQ, because the EQ is stored on the headphones. It is an onboard EQ. I'm just using their app to customize it the way that I like, because the stock sound is clearly worse than, frankly, all of these. But with my EQ, I actually think it's pretty good. I don't think it's very incisive. We're talking about imaging performance, which usually comes across from like the incisiveness of the treble. This has some of the softest, least incisive treble of the bunch. So the imaging performance is pretty bad on it, to be honest, even with my EQ. But the tonal balance is, as you might expect, because I tuned it to my preferences, it's my favorite of the bunch. It's just the most balanced of the bunch. It still has quite a bit of bass because I left it in there, because that's what this headphone's all about. But I don't know, it's actually just kind of a nice, pleasant sounding headphone that's maybe not particularly engaging because it doesn't have that incisiveness and that imaging performance, but it's not bad. I actually, just for funsies, I ranked these. I was listening to these and chatting on Discord. So if you ever, just by the way, want to know what's going on in my head as I'm doing reviews of these things, a lot of the times I'll post early notes on Discord, link in the description down below if you wanna join and catch those. But while I was demoing these headphones and had them all hooked up to an amplifier all at the same time, listening to them, and yeah, this was actually my favorite of the bunch, the Sony XM6. I would say my least favorite of the bunch is the FT13. It's just not listenable to me with that treble performance. Next would be the AKG, which is just really dull and boring. It's not offensive, but man, it is not engaging to listen to. And then finally, I would say probably the FT1 kind of comes up in the middle. And I actually, as gigabass and kind of unserious as this headphone is, I kind of like it. This one's got a little bit of a soft spot for me. But that said, let me give you a review on these headphones. Let's wrap up this review on the FT1 and the FT13, giving them scores. The FT1, original headphone, again, I got a lot of hype last year. I can kind of understand why, but I'm also not really that excited about this headphone. It's a decent headphone. If you're looking for something closed back under 200 bucks, I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. It is a good headphone. Not very exciting to listen to for me, but again, if it fits what you need, there you go. The FT13, however, with the stock pads, with these lambskin pads, it would be like an easy 1 star for me, because it's just like, frankly, uncomfortable to listen to. With the suede pads that we've got on here, I'll bump it up to 2, I guess, but it still has some problems in terms of the fit and comfort. I wish this thing wasn't worse in terms of build quality, in terms of the ergonomics than the FT1, but if you still want to check it out, of course, I've got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't yet, well, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, also linked in the description, like I mentioned, and I'll catch you in the next super review. Cheers.
Joined with the force of reviews, we now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get into the